Okay, dreamer, please.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be checking out the October tier list and you'll be very happy to know that I've included STEM recommendations on the PvP side. Okay, and hopefully we will have a much better picture of how things are working now in the game. Without further ado, let us jump right into the PvP meta changes. Okay, so if you can see here, there is quite an obvious change in the offensive team. Previously we had this setup, but actually to be honest, there's nothing much that has changed except that Rudy has been added back to the SS tier. Many people are wondering why Rudy actually dropped. He wasn't used that much because many people were still running Red Grid and Anti, okay, in the offensive team, but ever since more and more people have built out ambush sets for Rudy has went back into the SS tier for offensive teams to be used alongside Jack. So the ambush set, in case you do not know what it does, it basically increases the buff duration reduction turn count. So Rudy can straight up with the Gallidus Might reduce 3 turns of buff duration the moment he uses his shield. And as you know, shields tend to be prioritized in 7 Knights because it is a non-damaging skill, so he will definitely have a very high chance, almost a 50% I would say chance, or 70%, you know, to use his shield skill first, and there goes all the enemy's Guardian Rings. And then after that, if you have Jack on your side of the field, Jack will come in and cleanly wipe away all the enemies. So that is how powerful the Rudy and Jack combination is currently, which is why he is back in the SS tier. The other heroes in the SS tier, the other offensive heroes, they haven't actually, you know, gone through much changes. Primarily, Dylan's is still the buff blocker. Phi is still very strong. Okay, even though many people, I don't think, use as much Phi now, but she is definitely still a very strong hero to have on the team. Colt and Fenrir, they are kind of the optional ones, and even Red Grid, I would say she is somewhere in the middle of S tier and SS tier, okay, because many people have started to not use her due to the fact that they are using the Jack, Rudy, Dylan's, Fenrir or Phi combination, you know. So Red Grid kind of fall off a bit, but she's still very strong, I think, and definitely I still see people using her, but just not as much. And as you can see, I have also included the STEM set. So for Dylan's, you will really want to go with the Storm set. For the Phi and Jack, Blessing sets are good. Jack can also run the ambush if you want, so that he can reduce buff duration turn count by 3 as well if he uses his top skill. For Red Grid, you can either go with the Fortune or the Patience. The Patience is actually less preferred because at the 6-piece Patience set, it will reduce damage from skills that deal damage based on HP. Proportional to HP, which is not very common in the current meta. Many heroes tend to, you know, ignore defense skills, and those are the skills that are dealing damage proportional to defense and defense offset as well. So defense Fortune set is more useful in that aspect. Okay, for Anti, you definitely want to run the Initiate set on her so that she can reset her Awaken skill. And for Colt, it's either or for me. Okay, I'm not sure what most people actually use for her, but I think Initiate makes sense if you want her to cleanse. If you don't have a cleanser on your offensive team, I think having Colt around will be good with the cleanse. And then Fortune is for those who want more defense on Colt herself. Okay, moving to the S tier, we have a newcomer here, and that is Gideon. Gideon is actually a pretty decent offensive hero, okay, because he also has the same defense decrease like Dylan's, whereby he decreases defense of all the enemies by 2000, and he also increases your status, increases the chance of you landing status effects, and also increases damage the enemies take, right? So he's pretty decent, but because of the current situation with the offensive team, it's so strong, I don't really see many people running Dylan's in the top tier offensive team because of the Rudy and Jack slaughter that could happen. Okay, so he actually belongs in the S tier, I feel, along with Tio and Chip. They are really good additions, you know, good variants for the offensive team, but I don't see them being the meta offensive team, part of the meta offensive team, unfortunately. Okay, Chip as well, you know, as we all know, he hasn't been really in the meta in the offensive team at all, but there are some people that are using him pretty well, And his ability to actually nerf Revive is actually going to be helpful, especially if more people start using Anti and Gidden together. I think Chip could have a real chance of climbing up the meta. That's provided though that he does survive, okay? Judas is somewhat still around. Not many people will tend to use him in the offensive team, but there are some people that still do for the fact that he reduces recovery rate of enemies. So he's still pretty useful, and all these heroes, if you look, they all mostly have the blessing set if you use them in an offensive team because for the firepower that they have. Okay, for Tio, of course, he has 100% chance to land effect attacks, so you can go with a hybrid set of Storm and Blessing. Yeah, so half Storm will actually increase his basic attack damage, and having more Blessing will also increase his attack stat, allowing him to do more damage. Okay, Gerard, I think, hasn't really been used in the offensive team as well, but you know, if he is still a pretty cheap version for Jack if you really need some defense for your offensive team. Nothing much has changed in the A tier of the offensive team. These are just optional heroes that you can throw in and will benefit your offensive team, especially for the new and returning players. Okay, Galidus is going to be seen throughout the tier list because he is one of the only, if not the only, death immunity provider. Okay. Now for the Magic team, previously we had some very crowded situation. If you observe here, yeah, the Magic team was very crowded. Like so many heroes, so many varieties. I think we have actually narrowed this down currently in the meta. Okay, so it's really back to this team. The new incoming hero is Myth Vanessa. Myth Vanessa is actually such a great support hero for the Magic team. Not only resetting awakening skills, but also to increase lethal rate of all allies. That is where her strength lies, and that really kind of pushes rank grade off, okay, into the S tier, as you can see. The reason why rank grade was used before was not only for the status effect resist rate increase, but also for defense increase and the lethal rate increase. So that was actually pretty helpful. But since Vanessa is a Magic hero, coming into the Magic team makes more sense, and she can also reset awaken skill, so that's going to be much more helpful than rank grade herself. And then we also have Rudy coming back into the S tier. Previously, SS tier, he was in the S tier. I can't remember what explanation I gave for that, but yeah, he is back. Previously, people were running Rangrid and Judas together, but now Rudy is back again in the SS tier with Judas and the first three heroes, the Yonhee, Baal, and Anti trio with Rudy and Judas. That is still pretty much the meta. 4 months ago, Rudy was in the SS tier as well, and he got pushed back by Rangrid, and now he's back again. Okay, Scold has also shifted down from the SS tier. I think with Baal coming in and Vanessa coming in, Scold's utility will, even though she has a very good skill set allowing you to do more damage, but the fact that Baal is so common now, especially with the recent gifts that they have been giving, you know, the Prime Hero Selectors and the Synthesis event and all that kind of thing, I think people are starting to just not use her as anymore. Okay, so the many Magic heroes, in fact like Eve as well, Eve has fallen off the SS tier because of Baal, and I think the current core of the Magic team is just way too strong due to Baal's ability to reduce defense straight up at level 44. So again, talking about the stamps, Yonhee should definitely be on a Storm set, while Baal and Rudy will have the Ambush set because Baal actually has the ability to reduce buff duration on both her skills, so having the Ambush set on her will allow her to reduce 2 turns no matter what skill she uses, so that's pretty good. I think it's pretty self-explanatory for Anti at this point. For Vanessa, I'm not sure if she can reset her awaken skill with the Initiate set. Otherwise, I think the Blessing set or even a defensive kind of set like the Fortune set could work as well. Judas can also use the Storm set because I've actually heard that many people are running Judas on the speed build right now to actually complement with Death or Yonhee on the Magic team. So that is pretty fresh, and I think Judas having the Blessing or Storm set will actually work as well. Rin is of course there for crit and lethal damage increase if you have 4 magic heroes. So usually people might do Yonhee, Bile, Anti, Rin, maybe even Vanessa, so that you have a more balanced crit and lethal rate, so that Rin's passive actually makes sense, because without a very high lethal rate, you'll probably only benefit from half of Rin's passive anyway. So over here in the S tier for the magic team, we do have Gideon coming in as well in the S tier. Gideon is also pretty decent, I would say, because he does have certain elements of his passive that can help the magic team. For example, the part whereby he decreases defense of 2000. Previously, the magic team only had Yonhee doing that, and it's only for the frontline enemies. Okay, and then Gideon also allows you to increase your status effect casting, which is something more commonly seen in magic teams, whereby they can cast status effects better. Okay, more skills that cast status effects. So I think Gideon is one of those that could also make it into the magic team if you decide to go with a magic team variant that focuses on status effects. Okay, not only that, I mean, his skill set is still pretty strong in the magic team, and he can support pretty well. So the other ones here are Orly and Freya that have dropped down. I've put him here in the A tier. I've also removed Red Grid from the A tier. Okay, if you've previously seen, we had Red Grid here. The reason, of course, again, is because of Bile. There's no use for Red Grid anymore. It doesn't make sense for an offensive team supporter to be on the magic team. Previously, we could have Red Grid, you know, being there for isolation purposes, but since Bile is here, there's really no use for Red Grid anymore. And again, as I said, Eve is seldom used already, so she's in the S tier. Actually, to be honest, Daya, Clemith and Rosie, they are almost not used at all. But the thing is, they do support magic teams pretty well. Okay, I mean, I will kind of review this again next 2 months later to see if they really should still be on the tier list, because ultimately no one is using them at all. The current team that most people are using only comprises of hero in the SS tier. Okay, yeah, so that's the magic team for you. Nothing much has changed in the universal team. In fact, this was the same kind of heroes that were used 2 months ago, and currently it's still the same. Mainly because we don't really have any very strong universal heroes coming out to change the meta. Speaking of which, we did get Elf. Elf is someone that, you know, I didn't test him at level 44 yet in Arena, so I'm not exactly sure if he really belongs in the SS tier. But I haven't seen anyone also use him, because I was doing a check for this video with the players in the top tier, in the Arena tier, and I don't see Elf at all. Maybe only one player is using him. Okay, most players have shifted over to the magic and offensive teams already, and maybe even dev teams. So for Elf, I can't really give a very certain conclusion about him. Okay, but from what I can see, he is gonna be a decent addition to the universal team for sure, especially him being the one with the highest speed for universal hero. So he's very likely to be a speed leader or attack leader, especially looking from his skill set as well. So I think a Storm set and Blessing set will work for him, and after he hits level 44, you know, he will give his entire team 2000 defense, which I think will counteract against all the other decreases that are around, making universal teams slightly bulkier and better. The other heroes in the universal team still remain. Again, I don't really see much of them being used, like Red Grid. Red Grid is still fine, but Daya and Clemith, they have good utility on their skill set, but they are seldom used. Okay, so that's why I just threw them in the S tier, but I will review that again. Again, I don't think there's much to be said about the stem sets. Okay, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, especially for Abel. He is the DPS of the universal team, so that's why he needs to be on a Storm set, which is also the same reason why I can't see Elf on the universal team in the SS tier, because the way Elf and Abel works is kind of the same. They are both counter-based heroes, speed-based heroes, so it doesn't really make sense to have two magic users, magic universal heroes on the universal team doing the same thing. So you know, if you really would want to run Elf, I would probably run him in a more defensive support based kind of situation, or maybe make him a second counter. That could work. Okay, but we still have to test that out, of course. And nothing has changed in the A tier for the universal team. It's still gonna be Ares. Ares is actually pretty decent, okay, for PvP. Don't think that she is just a hero for PvE. Except for her 100% accuracy rate increase, everything else is pretty applicable to PvP as well, and it works really well. Okay, Gallitus and Emilia again are pretty decent universal heroes, except that their stats would be way lower than what we expect. The dev team has finally had a new friend, which is Gideon. So this pushes Eileen down into the S tier, of course, because Gideon literally gives better effects and better utility on the dev team. Previously, we had Eileen, who required 4 universal heroes or 3 to actually decrease enemy status effect resist rate, but Gideon straight up reduces 40% the moment he hits the field. So on a dev team, the current dev team is pretty much these 5 heroes. Rangrid is still somewhat optional unless you really want to have some kind of bulk for your dev team. Otherwise, nobody will really run Rangrid, but still decent. The first 5 are the main core dev team right now. The other heroes in the dev team in the S tier, they're all using storm sets, of course, because they mainly rely. The fact that they are even here is because they do have very good basic attacks to cast dev. Okay, but beyond that, they don't have any skill sets that truly support the dev team. So if you really want to use them in the dev team, make sure you do have the storm sets on them. For the tank team, nothing has changed except for the S tier. Okay, I've decided to put Elf there as well because upon consideration, previously we actually had Jack and Gerard in the S tier. The reason why they were there is because they did increase defense, okay, for tank teams, I guess, but then they had a criteria as well. So it wasn't very efficient, but Elf has come along and Elf straight up just gives you 2000 defense, which I think will benefit the tank team pretty well. So it is likely that, Elf could be one of the better tank team heroes, especially with his speed. He could be a tank team DPS, who knows. But apart from that, all these heroes still remain the same, whereby the Bile really helps to support your tank team damage as well. Platin is there for the HP conversion to 1. Okay, that will be very helpful for tank teams who do not do that much damage. Okay, I think even Gideon could be here because he does very good fixed damage, but we'll observe, of course. So one thing you will realize is that Rudy actually has the fortune set here. So I would say that in a tank team, Rudy has more flexibility in terms of his stem set, whereby you can actually go more defensive rather than just relying on the ambush, because for the tank team, ultimately you want to stay alive, right? So it's not so much about doing the damage straight up, because you're gonna have Platin there for you to reduce HP anyway. So I think fortune set on a Rudy for the tank team is also a variable. It's also a good consideration. Beyond that, nothing changed in the tank team for the S tier and A tier. I still kept the same heroes to contribute for the tank team, whether it is heals, lifesteal, or damage, so they are all pretty okay. So this is the PvP comparison. We are gonna move into the PvE now. For the PvE side, to be honest, also there hasn't been many changes. After all, we only have had 3 heroes released since 2 months ago. So one of the heroes which I actually bumped to the SS tier is Myth Vanessa. I think she is really amazing, okay, for PvE. Not only can she increase the lethal rate of your entire team, especially for the Velica team, she also helps to reset Velica's awakening skill, making her such a valuable asset for the Velica magic teams. Okay, previously I did have her in the S tier in her awakened form, so her awakened form also did the reset, but that was all. That was the only reason why she was there. Now that she has the lethal rate, okay, she is basically on par with Fenrir for May. Like, Fenrir is good for May, now Vanessa is good for Velica, so I think she deserves a spot in the SS tier now. Okay. For the S tier, I've actually increased and bumped up Jack because I've realized that he is used a lot more in Heavenly Stairs as a DPS. He is the only hero that has 2 very strong 5-man AoE, and is completely supported by the Fighter's Soul effect. So he will do huge damage okay, when he is on the back line and he is given the right gear. And I've seen people use him as a DPS in Heavenly Stairs, and I think that's pretty amazing, especially for the higher floors whereby you cannot have, you know, Jave and Espada to do the very fast clearing for you. So it is a possible option. He is almost like Milia level of usage. Okay, so that is why I bumped him up to S tier. And on top of that, he also is able to reduce buff duration pretty well. So perhaps he can be used to reduce buff duration in whatever situation you need alongside May's offensive team, right? For the A tier, nothing has changed, but just to evaluate a little bit more, I think Eve is also someone that is a very good magic AoE DPS, okay, which we kind of lack if I'm not wrong if you look at the S tier. So it is very likely that Eve may go up to the S tier in PvE, but only for Heavenly Stairs. Okay, or if you would like to use her in any other situation, I think Eve would be a very strong contender for a magic AoE DPS because we don't really have that. Milia is universal, Abel is universal, Galidus is universal. Galidus isn't even a magic user. So yeah, I think Eve has a shot because she has chain attack as well. So we'll see. Apart from that, nothing has changed as mentioned. Yeah, and moving into the B tier, we do have Elf and Gideon here. The reason why I put them there is because I really don't see much use of their skill sets or whatever purpose that they have in PvE. Let's talk about Elf in the first place. So for Elf, he does increase damage of 4-man targets. Usually our DPSs don't use 4-man targets, right? 4-man attacks, I mean, they use single targets. So I don't really see him there, but he does do fixed damage. He does also increase the bulk of your heroes. He does also reduce the magic attack and physical attack of enemies, which made me feel that, oh, I think he could be used in siege defense. Yeah, but it's very strange to recommend people to have a prime hero in siege defense, but you know, if you really want to look at it objectively, his skill set does suit the siege defense context, and I think that's one area that he could be in. Same goes for Gideon, to be honest. Okay, I don't see much PvE utility in his skill set at all because such that he increases damage dealt to enemies, right? So that is covered by Judas above. Okay, so it's not as much as Judas, and he also decreases defense by 2000. Just that alone makes me feel that okay, maybe he could be used. But then again, you want to use the debuff from, for example, Yuri, right? Yuri's debuff is so much more superior than what Gideon provides on his passive. But the reason why I didn't want to push Gideon all the way down to maybe C or D tier is because, you know, what if there's a situation whereby you don't want to use a skill and you just straight up want to do damage immediately? He could be used in Heavenly Stairs as well as just a passive provider to reduce the defenses and increase the damage the enemy takes without you having to land any certain debuffs on the enemies, you know. So it's a pretty good option, I would say. You can use him there. And in terms of siege defense, he does have a very heavy hitting fixed damage skill, right, on his awakened skill. So, you know, given the right situation, you can actually loop his awakened skill very well and just do it so many times that your siege defense score can actually go up. Yeah, that is one way I think, you know, could fit him. I'm just thinking out of the box, thinking where everything can go, and yeah, this is what I came up with. So let me know what you guys think. Nothing much has changed in the C and D tier at all. Okay, these are totally heroes that no one uses in PvE. So yeah, this is all for the PvE and PvP tier list for October. It's pretty short, but there are not many changes. Do let me know what you think of the tier list, and if you think that there are any heroes that should be increased or decreased or raised and dropped, do let me know in the comments as well. Big shout out to my channel members, GMD Phoenix, Yamaki, Hajime, and Reggie Bautista for the support. Stay tuned for more videos. Thank you so much, and see you!